stories were told that even the foodless child knew that the light of civilization dawned from Africa. At a time, the world was drenched in darkness, until the old pages of history faded our stories into oceans of deceptive and perceptive nature, where our achievements were characterized as worthless. And that we never at any slide in history contribute to the human race. The voices of our people got lost amongst the tumult of voices echoed from the whip of slave masters. Our beautiful women with dangling rhythms of their backside at the slightest movement of their bodies got a white man attracted, and so their pride was arrested, bundled and shipped their way into unknown lands of thirst, then saw the birth of mulattoes. From east to west, from north to south, a breeze gathered to wake a country from the slumber of colonialism into a realm of freedom. Then our young pride fell to wake a new nation, Ghana. Surprisingly, the crow of Indewura Jacques cock never sounded as usual in our ears, but rather a heavy storm from the voice of Nkrumah saying, Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. Multitudes danced, sang and whined away their worries into sleep when Dr. Ephraim Amo brought out his attempt the band to blow soulful melodies to greet the arrival of a new nation, Ghana. Yes, inspired Philip Bello to sing from the depth of his heart a song with God tears rolling down the cheek onto our land to nurture our agriculture, to become our backbone when Tetekwashi came out to show to the new nation a seed of life hidden in cocoa. What men can do, women can do too. And then came Miss Theodosia Oko with her flag covered in red, gold, green, with the black stars rising into the sky to flatter serenely from lamppost to the glory of Liberos. God bless our homeland, Ghana. On that day of freedom, fabrics of Ghanaian societies intertwined to form loops of a united people, submerged in containers, smoked together, devoid of tribalism. We bade the white men and women farewell as they took bag and baggage, kith and kin from a land of gold and grew to their world of splendor, built from our sweat. But throughout all these years, we may want to set into areas that soiled our white garments to purge our nation of all stains, to rebuild its focus towards economic liberation. Our systems may have some challenges, but our passion and determination will clear the path to our destiny for salvation. Let's not give up on the Ghanaian dream. Let's keep pushing the wind of destiny. As the wind of a new era blows against our infant dreams and drags us through the plain of toughness as we rebuild our nation, we must know that our survival will only be assured by the consolidation of our dreams in our past while acting on them today. Songs of our infant voices, as shrill and thin as they may sound, must not be used. Must not halt our quest to unlocking our national potentials to overflow joyousness into the very recesses of our near resignation towards a better tomorrow. It is okay to be different. Even nature agrees we all can be equal, perfect. The differences nature created are for a joint effort towards progress. Therefore, if our nation must see the face of prosperity, our differences must in equal measure see convergence. Thank you.
See, there was something critical in the introduction that was left out. I was a deputy choir master. Sharp. Thank you. Thank you very much.
V8. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, distinguished colleagues here on the high table, especially the hall master, deputy master, faculty members, well, senior members, junior members, fellow vandals. And there may be a few non-vandals in the audience as well, so let's say ladies and gentlemen. Vandals by associates, by association as it were, associate vandals. Those were the ladies who took a lot of credit in spending more time here than some vandals themselves. It's a great honor for me to have been asked to come here this evening to have a conversation really with you, even though the topic says lecture. I've never really been a lecturer, even though I had the honor and privilege to be a university president at one of the private universities here in Ghana. But I was given an opportunity to consider academia as a profession when I finished my first year at university and rather my first degree, and was asked to go and do a certain postgraduate studies overseas and come and lecture, and I declined it. Later, when I came to the School of Journalism and Communication, I was again offered that opportunity and I declined it. And it's a shame because maybe I could have been a good lecturer, who knows. But here we are on the hallowed grounds of Ghana's premier academic institution, and also, without doubt, the most important and the most prestigious hall of residence of any tertiary institution in Ghana and probably in all of Africa. But we are here when I was told that, I told some people of the head that I was coming to speak here on vandalism. They said, oh, I didn't know you were a vandal. How did you become a vandal? Why would you want to associate yourself with these vandals anyway? So it became clear to me that vandalism, as understood by the outside world, is not as we understand it here. And since this message is not just for all of us in this room, but for a larger audience that is outside, you forgive me for attempting to explain to them who a vandal is, what is vandalism, and indeed some of the values and the efforts that have bound us together over the years. Indeed, when one of the gentlemen was asked to come and pray after the singing of the songs, I was getting concerned that the kind of prayer he was going to give would have involved some of the words that you were using in the songs, you know, because God created all those objects. Yeah? So, because what I'm saying is to a larger audience, and there are young ones and children also listening to the sound of my voice, I will refrain from giving you an adjective that the hallmaster was asking for. A powerful one, but I'll share with you privately afterwards. It's possible that older vandals, that's vandals who are older than I am, they may be in a better position to provide us all with more accurate information about the true origins of vandalism and the early life in Commonwealth Hall in the late 1950s and 60s, when this hall, as you know, was first built and occupied. But I can speak about the time that some of us arrived here in Vandal City in September 1970, when vandalism, as then practiced, was already well grounded and an integral part of hall life. As you know, the Commonwealth Hall was built at the time of Ghana's independence, 1957, and it was named after the Commonwealth because that's the same year we joined the Commonwealth of Nations. And that is why on this occasion of Ghana's 60th anniversary as an independent country, it's also very timely that this hall also should be celebrating and commemorating its own 60th anniversary. So basically, the hall is as old as Ghana, and Ghana is as old as the hall. That, of course, makes it important that whatever we do here has a direct bearing and relationship with what happens in our country as a whole. By the late 60s and 70s, as revealed by officials of the University Registry, Commonwealth Hall, and I hope this hasn't changed, but the University Registry told us at the time that every single year, the demand by male students for residency, you had a choice. In those days, you would offer to stay in Commonwealth or Legon or Sabah, and the majority of students, 75 to 80%, on almost an annual basis, would select Commonwealth Hall. But quite clearly, the university couldn't admit all male students here. So some of those who wanted to be in Commonwealth ended up in the minion states at the bottom of the hill, the vassal states. And those of us standing on the observatory and looking down on our subjects in the other states, obviously, after a while, there was a resentment that those people in those halls felt about Commonwealth, simply because this is where they would have liked to reside, but they didn't get the chance to stay here. So they would stay on campus for 3 years or now 4 years, sometimes come for graduate studies and be very resentful and unhappy that they didn't get into this famous and prestigious hall. So those of us who got the chance to be here, like all of us here, I think we have the right to be very proud of that opportunity and to thank the good Lord and the University Administration for giving us those opportunities. But it's also well known that not all residents of Commonwealth Hall are vandals. I don't know whether this is something you are aware of. Mere residence of Commonwealth Hall does not make you a vandal. Indeed, in our time, students who are hardcore crife would not usually qualify for membership of the vandal society. Teetotalers, those who don't drink at all, it was difficult to qualify. Father Bacchus would not be able to admit you into the vandal. Then homosexuals. These days, people are more liberal about it, but in those days, you dare not be homosexual and attempt to be a vandal. The two just didn't work together. Then, of course, there are a lot of foreign students coming to this campus at the time, not as many as you tend to have now. And those foreign students tended to be more non-African. You had Chinese students, American students, some European students here. And they were given the option of not conforming to vandalistic rituals. So vandalism itself is embedded in democracy. In other words, the freedom of choice to either belong or not to belong. But if you chose not to be a vandal, or if you belong to any of these categories, then ponding was your regular fate, as it were, because we had to attempt to persuade you, convince you, or convert you in some cases. You can imagine how difficult it would be to convert a homosexual to heterosexual behavior. So vandalism began with those underlying practices, and also we must be clear about the fact that vandals were very focused about their priorities. You came to a university principally for scholastic achievement. Other things will be added to it. So vandals did not joke at all with their books, and I'm sure they still don't. And that's why we are actually having this conference on the top of what I believe is still the library, which was very full in those days. Every night, you couldn't get a seat. So vandals will study hard, and then, of course, they'll play very hard. But beyond taking interest in your scholastic work was also the issue of self-development, and also the leadership training that you got from your colleagues and from other senior vandals, and for national and global leadership. So the values and ethos and the practices that have distinguished vandals from other university students here at Legon and other campuses in Ghana or even other African countries include such values as excellence in scholarship, a sense of brotherhood, tolerance for different points of view, truthfulness, because truth stands, the need to have freedom. All the songs you're singing is about a sense of your liberation. The courage, bravery, leadership, a sense of competitiveness, capacity for innovation and creativity, as we saw in the poetry that we heard, a boldness that also led to anti-authoritarianism. So if people are being authoritarian, whether at the hall, master level, or vice chancellor level, they heard a lot of noise from this hall. As a former chairman of the Supreme Council of Vandals and Guys from the 1974 to 76 period, I can attest to the varying levels of importance and priority that vandals have attached to these very important values over the years. But you may be mindful of the fact that the Supreme Council of Vandals and Guys then, and I hope still now, have always been the traditional custodians of the principles of vandalism. And we often had to epitomize the role of this council by protecting the values and ethos of vandalism, and also by bringing out the behavior of individuals on the campus that did not merit their participation in a tertiary educational experience. But notwithstanding the negative perceptions that have attended the practice of vandalism, especially during Vandals' Day, when Father Bacchus would descend from the skies and bacchanalian orgies will be let loose on campus. Commonwealth Hall and vandalism have made enormous contributions to Ghana, to Africa, and the world. From the presidency to the cabinet, to the Supreme Court, to Parliament, and to the highest echelons of the banking, mining, industrial, and corporate worlds, vandals have made and continue to make valiant contributions to human progress. Commonwealth Hall and vandalism have become associated in the public mind with the more external demonstrations of the culture of vandalism, the heckling, the occasional profanity, the boozing, the something, viciousness, the demonstration sometimes against decisions of authority that we may disagree with. These are the aspects of vandalism that have become somewhat publicly known. But most people have not appreciated that the more visible parts of vandalism are not only the parts of vandalism that relate to the core principles. So as practiced in the 1960s and 70s, some of these practices and principles involved a high sense of idealism, a high sense of self-expectation. People expected a lot from themselves and from each other, a sense of unity and solidarity, especially with the downtrodden and those that needed support, patriotism and nationalism being created and, as it were, born in the same year as our independence. Most vandals have a very high sense of patriotism. And of course, as the national anthem that was referred to in the poetry indicates, we also were always inclined to resist oppressors' rule. Above all, we have stood by our hall motto, which is truth stands. Chosen to attend a Ghanaian university, he would have chosen to reside in Commonwealth Hall. And I'm also of the view that if Flight Lieutenant Rawlings had also chosen to attend a Ghanaian university, he would also have resided here because of his emphasis on the subject of probity, integrity, and accountability in public service, which were the values that were being promoted in the 1980s and in the 1990s. I can attest to the potent powers of the moral persuasion of a certain general who was very important during our era, General Kohia. General Kohia was the name for the editor of the Commonwealth Hall Echo, the newsletter. And I had the privilege of editing the Commonwealth Hall Echo between 1972 and 1973, and also as the chairman of the editorial board in 75 and 76. Now, General Kohia's responsibility was to survey the whole campus and identify particular individuals in certain halls of residence, including Commonwealth Hall, who by their very deviant behavior were bringing down the standards of the university. And without mentioning the person's name, but by very creative, descriptive powers, everybody could recognize that faculty member, it could be lecturer, it could be a student, it could be a worker, who was doing things that were not consonant with good behavior. So in a certain sense, vandals were also uplifting and upholding high moral standards here on the campus. And that is one of the attributes of vandalism that is not always appreciated, because they listen to the songs, but they don't know what you're doing behind the scenes to also maintain good moral standing. Now, academic excellence took the form of TDB studying. Especially, I hear exam week is coming up very soon. So that's partly why some people are not here. Others are watching apparently a soccer match. But studying the whole night until daybreak was a very common practice. I don't know whether you do that these days. But in spite of the length of time people devoted to their studies, they still maintain a certain amount of discipline. Now, the Vandal sacred cry, which I haven't heard for a long time, and I hope it's still part of the scheme of attributes of vandalism. that cry was so sacred that only the chairman of the Supreme Council of Vandals and Guys and the chief vandal were authorized at the time to initiate it. Because you only initiated it when there was crisis, a possible invasion of the hall by some other downtrodden, hall members, or security staff were being asked to come and arrest a student for one thing or the other, and the students were protesting against it. But our penchant for resisting oppression and also for insisting on equality took the form once in 1972 when we got tired of academic pomposity, known as akapompo. Maybe some of you don't know that there was a time when on every Wednesday you had to wear your gown, academic gown, to go to dinner in the dining hall. And you marched in rows, sat down formally, formal dinner, and then the masters would have a high table and have a selection of wines to drink. Well, you don't drink the wine, you just watch the masters drinking it. So it got to a point when we thought we had had enough of this, disparity in the sharing of resources. So on a certain day, a gang of students, there was a cellar at the bottom of the dining area, in the basement, where cartons of wines had been stored, and vandals broke into the cellar and spirited away all these wines. I think that was the end of formal dinner in Commonwealth Hall. I don't know whether other halls were able to continue with the formal dinner. But as a result of that and some ponding that took place, some of us were actually arraigned before Labadi Magistrate Court, charged with, in the ponding of a certain hall officer. He claimed to have lost his jewelry, his watch, and his money, and all of that. So we had to go to Labadi Court. And then that's when old vandals came forward and actually helped to settle the matter. So old vandals are an important part of this hall, because when there's trouble in the hall, eventually you may have to fall on old vandals to resolve it. The nationalistic fervor of vandals also took the form of the leadership students of this hall played in the introduction of what has now become accepted as the National Service Scheme of Ghana. It was students from this hall who took the leadership in demonstrating in those days, in the days of the Buzia government first and then Jenakutu Achampong, for our desire and our demand to have both military training. We asked for 6 months military training and then 6 months of service to the community. And eventually, the government accepted the idea of national service, but removed the military training part of it out, because they did not want to have us know how to manage and use weapons. But we thought that that was the democratization of the instruments of violence, as we used to call it. That didn't happen. So the current national service scheme is a bit of a distortion of what we as vandals have fought for. As a result of that, some of us, including myself, became the first set of graduates who went to do national service in 1973. And I'm pleased that the national service scheme has managed to survive all these years. And everyone here will either do national service or has done national service. And indeed, I think now, if you don't do national service, your ability to become an MP or minister, I think also is now a matter of interest to the appointments committee. The practice of vandalism also, of course, extended beyond the campus of the university. And often during hall dances, we tended to colonize all the communities around here, especially where there were females of acceptable quality. So, Anumle, Okumblo, Bawaleshi, what is now West Legon, North Legon, all those became vassal states of the Vandal city, where people were allowed to roam freely and do a selection of whatever was satisfactory to them. But all within the law, of course, all within the law. There were no assaults on the opposite sex. It was all consensual. And I think you know that this was the favorite destination of most ladies in Volta Hall. In spite of all the profanity and whatever you are singing, of all the halls, this is where every woman wanted to be seen occasionally. So you can talk about Yababo Munsu, Yababo Mutsebe, all those things, they enjoyed it. I don't know about enahrument. Do you still enahru your roommates? In those days, there were only 2 people in a room. And if you had a partner that required somebody to exit the room for a few hours, then that was enahrument. But some people didn't understand that this should just be a few hours. Some will keep you outside your room for a whole night. If you're not careful, it can be the whole weekend. So the whole point was that we had all been through a very stultifying and stifling experience in secondary school, where you have your headmaster, you have your masters, you have prefects, and you are teenagers, and you really couldn't do very much. There are a lot of school rules. So when you get liberated, and from that age of 16 to 19, or whatever age you are, you come to a university, and suddenly you have all this freedom. And in those days, you had workers serving you in dining hall, cleaning your rooms, cleaning your bathroom. You just didn't do anything. At the end of the month, you actually got an allowance from the government called millions, and you're just there to drink and enjoy yourself. So you can imagine what you would do with that kind of freedom that had just been provided to you. So Father Bacchus had a lot of fun in those days. And all the mermaids in Water Hall, people became very good swimmers. You know, you go to water, you have to swim. And so the poetry that we heard just now from our Gombila friend reminded many of us of the experiences that those who went into Water Hall and eventually into Saba and next as well. Dangerous commodities, yes. I think many of the vandals here, not everybody may be as fluid with his words as our poet. And it may be that some may want to hire him from time to time if you need to go and convey a message to somebody in the female dormitories and you are short of words. You can ask him to offer you some consultancy. He'd be happy to do that. So we've had an experience in this hall of contributing significantly to the development of this country in all spheres of national life, and that is the 60 years of vandalism that we are talking about. But as we now look to the future, the next chapter, we find ourselves looking to the values that I mentioned earlier as the foundation of the behavioral foundation that we want to see in ourselves and in our colleagues as we contribute to national life. So if it's true that Ghana's independence is meaningless unless it's linked up with the total liberation of Africa, and if it's also true, as Nkrumah said, that the purpose of our independence was for the black man to be a master of his own affairs, then in what way can vandals translate these 2 fundamental principles of our independence after 60 years of Ghana's own independence and 60 years of Commonwealth Hall's existence? This moves us very quickly into the realm of economic development, because we basically had a national flag, a national anthem. The poetry referred to some of our, the Philip Behos and the Ephraim Amus and the Theodosian Okus, who were all part of the independence movement. But now, 60 years later, how do we gain our economic and financial independence? How do we integrate our economy with those of our African neighbors, which were all part of the independence dream at the time when Commonwealth was born? And I think this becomes the responsibility of this next generation of vandals, those who are current students in the hall and those who've just left the hall. But of course, all of us who are alive continue to have this as a responsibility as well. And of course, Ghana cannot develop by itself unless the neighborhood of Ghana, the neighbors of Ghana, beginning with ECOWAS and also continue to the rest of Africa, grow along with Ghana. In economics, there's a neighborhood effect. And just being in the right neighborhood, even if you are not doing as well, your neighbors can lift you up. And Ghana's economic development, of course, is therefore dependent on its ability to work with these neighbors so that we can lift each other up. So the ECOWAS community is a very important community for that future of the vandal spirit in Ghana and in the West African region. And we are also honored that for the first time, I believe, in Ghana's history and in the history of Commonwealth Hall, Vandal City has contributed a vice president of the whole of Africa at the African Union. in the person of the Honorable Kwesi Kwartey, who is now the Deputy Vice or Deputy Chairperson of African Union Commission. That again is just an example of the many things that vandals are doing all around the world. But I'm saying if we've got the vandal now, and therefore allowing this continent to compete more effectively with Europe, with North America, with Asia, then we have an unusual opportunity to take advantage of not just that one person, but that network of vandals who've graduated in many fields and who are out there excelling and who can be the fulcrum and the platform through which we move this nation's agenda forward. So I'm imagining a future where vandals, because of their unique spirit, the values that I stated earlier, the spirit of leadership, the spirit of unity, the spirit of brotherhood, the spirit of patriotism, the spirit of standing for the truth and speaking the truth, those things that unite us, when we go into the world with them, how do we carve a critical mass of people, professionals, public servants, private business people, people in academia, in the churches, who with that similar set of values can push the national agenda forward and raise Africa's image and reputation, and as well as our economic standing and our economic progress. So, for example, we may make certain comments about Ghana's educational system, and we may recognize some aspects of this educational system that are not as solid as it should be. We don't have as much innovation, as much inventiveness, as much creative problem solving, or as much entrepreneurship in our educational content as we think should be the case. But this is partly because of what our colonial masters left us with, but also what we ourselves may have failed to change. So I remember the comments of a former Vice-Chancellor of the University of Science and Technology at a time when some Ghanaians were recommending, in the late 2007, 2008 period, I think, about 10 years ago, that Apostle Kojo Safo, the man who has invented these Kantanka cars, probably deserves to be made a member of the University Council of Kwame Nkrumah University. And the Vice-Chancellor at the time, who sadly has passed on, famously was reported to have said, and I quote him, that the University of Science and Technology is an institution whose job is to teach students how things are made, but not how to make them. The University of Science and Technology is an institution whose responsibility is to teach students how things are made, but not how to make them. And he was very serious about it. And he may have had a good point from a purely academic point of view, because he was trying to distinguish between a university and, let's say, a polytechnic, I think. But if that is the case, then we have a very sad situation, and it requires a revolutionary thinking, because engineers are taught this is how a microphone is made, this is how a car is made, this is how a TV set is made, but don't go and make it. And that, in my judgment, was what was passed on by colonial masters, because they didn't want us to make products that would compete with those that they were selling to us. They simply wanted us to continue to satisfy them with raw materials. And so 60 years after independence, we are still pushing as much of our cocoa beans in raw form as we can. We are still selling almost all our cashew crop in raw form rather than processing it. We are still shipping most of our gold in raw form rather than processing it. And this is where I think the vandal spirit must say, no, we don't accept this, and we must do something about it. And we cannot be intimidated by those who will fight against it, because there are always vested interests in these very sectors I'm talking about. And that the vandal spirit of defiance will work together to fight against some of these things that are making this question in a number of fora. In fact, the first time I did this was in the Great Hall, when I was then a president of a private university, and I was asked to speak to about 1,000 first-year students. Subsequently, I spoke at the University of Science and Technology to about 500 professors and lecturers last year. And only 2 weeks ago or so, or last week, I was at the University of Cape Coast, where I also asked the same question. And now that I'm on my own Vandal City floor, Allow me to ask that question and let's see whether can do any better. And if we can't, you appreciate what I'm saying. And you don't have to be embarrassed because I don't have the answer to that question myself. How many of you here, irrespective of what subjects you are studying, feel comfortable that you can write a one-page essay, one page, to summarize the process by which the cocoa pod, which we all believe is now a major export product of Ghana, the process by which you pluck it, you harvest it, you dry it, and eventually convert it into cocoa butter, cocoa oil, cocoa cake, and chocolate, and get maybe a B-, not even an A. The exact processes, to what temperatures you heat it, what chemicals you may add, the temperature to which you cool it, what equipment or machinery it goes through, and eventually becomes something called cocoa oil, cocoa cake, cocoa butter. Now, this is a product that for the last 60 years has been a big backbone of our economy. And for the next 60 years will probably continue to be a very important part of our economy. So whether you studied agronomy or you studied biochemistry or industrial processing, I've tested it in 3 university campuses. That is the height of our academic knowledge in Ghana. And in all those places, in tech, 2 or 3 people raised their hands. We didn't test them, but I said B-, not even A. And the reason is not because we are stupid. It's just that nobody is teaching us. It's not in a school curriculum. It ought to be in the school curriculum that all of us, as long as Ghana is going to be a cocoa-producing country for the next 30, 40 years, we must all be able to write that one-page essay and get at least a B-. Why? Because if you graduate and you can't get a job immediately, but you know how to produce chocolate, as young men and women in Belgium, Brussels are doing, in very, very small rooms. A room about 1/4 of this hall, you can do chocolate making in. And you don't have to be a brain surgeon to do it. But we have the products, and they are doing the chocolates there. You go to Switzerland, small families, teenagers they all know how to do chocolate. But we don't know how to do chocolate, and yet we produce the cocoa. And so people say they're unemployed, Association of Unemployed Graduates. When that cocoa chocolate industry alone could easily employ 100,000 people. But it must get into our curriculum, it must be part of things we study routinely. Because anybody who can pass O-level maths, O-level biology, O-level science can pass that subject without sweating, but it's just not being taught. That is why one of the organizations I'm affiliated with, the Africa Business Center for Developing Education, is working with a number of companies in what we are calling the Industrial Studies Series to produce some little booklets about how certain things are produced. Because I'm talking about managing our economy and taking control of our natural resources, our human resources and our natural resources. If we cannot take control of our natural resources, we are not going to develop as fast as we can as a country. And if we can't control or we don't know much about how cocoa is produced, and other foreigners who don't grow one single cocoa tree in their countries know more about it than us, how are you going to become economically independent? So I'm linking this to Ghana's independence, to the creation of Commonwealth, to the Vandal city and the Vandal spirit, and the next challenge to Vandals about how we control our economy and how we overcome our poverty and improve our wealth and become a middle-income country and even a high-income country. Then I tested another question, again, in the same 3 institutions, and I'm testing it here. We are all against galamsey, I believe, but we know that there are certain mud and rock samples people are picking up, and they process it, and by the time you know it's gold. And then from gold, you can make jewelry. Now, so some of those illiterate people are doing something. They may not know what they are doing, but they've been taught, mix it, do this, do this, do that, and they do it either with Chinese or Indian support, and they get the gold out of it. But how many of us who claim to be educated, including myself, and of course I was referred to as being on the board of Ashanti, Anglo-Good Ashanti, I'm no longer on that board, but I used to be on the board. But how many of us who may come from even a gold mining region of the country can write a 1-page essay on the processes by which certain rock samples are picked from the ground or mud and processed to the point using whatever chemicals, whatever heating, whatever cooling, until we get something called gold. For which reason, of all the countries on earth, colonialists went everywhere, and it's only on this land, they call this land the Gold Coast. The gold that we have, which has been exploited for almost 500 years, not more than 25% has been exploited yet. There's still about 75% that is yet to be exploited. So for at least 50 to 80 years, as long as we're on Earth, unless some new technology comes that can suck all of it out, we will be exploiting gold. And hopefully we won't be doing it the Galamsey style. But I'm saying, but if you and I, so let's ask the question. You are allowed to put up your hand. I don't know the answer. If you know the answer, put up your hand. You can write a one-page essay. One page, summarizing the process. How rock samples, mud are processed, and the result is gold, jewelry. So because if between cocoa and gold, which at different times have accounted for up to 50% of our export revenue until oil and gas came along, all of us in this room and in the universities I've told you about, and over the last 60 years, have not been taught that subject, and therefore don't know anything about it. And therefore we cannot control those natural resources, then the foreigners will control it for us. Is that correct? If we don't know how to control it, somebody will control it for us. So now we are learning about oil and gas, and I hope there are people who will be able to write that essay in oil and gas in due course. But the incredible thing is that most of us can't write these essays about how sugarcane becomes sugar, white sugar, how tomatoes can be processed and be made tomato paste, how many fruits can be distilled into various juices or into liquor. And these are, I'm talking about employment. I'm not talking about science and technology. I'm talking about how to create employment for all of us, how to disband the Association of Unemployed Graduates. Because if you are sitting here under the sound of my voice and you're still a student of Commonwealth Hall, one of your anxieties and your fears is that your older brother or sister may have graduated 3, 4, 5 years ago, and some are still sitting at home. So what is the future for you? If your older brother or sister has graduated and hasn't found work and is the Secretary General of the Association of Unemployed Graduates, and is waiting to go to the next Congress where he or she will present himself for the chairmanship. He's elevating himself or herself. That is not an association you want to go. You want to be the regional chairman, Western Region branch of the Association of Unemployed Graduates. So we didn't have the right knowledge. And when my friend here was sharing his poetry with me, I said to myself, there's a lot of knowledge that was given to me that, honestly, I must say is worthless. Because it hasn't done anything for me as such, even though I understood what people were trying to do. I mean, as I stand here, I was made to, in those days, we started broken English. You understand? So by the time we came here, Chief, take time. So the thing we do how be, it could be Boa, the Yahweh way interest, it could make a go with you. So I've been speaking a certain kind of English until now. Then that is broken English, which all of you speak. But we started it. It started during our era, broken English, from secondary school to here. Then I came here, they said they'll teach me another English. So we are listening. And even in secondary school, once upon a raw and gusty day, the roaring Tiber chafing with her shores, Caesar said to me, "Darest thou, Cassius, leap with me into yon angry flood and swim to yonder point?" Upon the word, acquitted as I was, I plunged in and bade him follow, which indeed he did. The torrent roared, and we did buffet it aside, ere with hearts of controversy. But that is somebody's English. But before we could get to the point proposed, Caesar said to me, "Help me, Cassius, or I sink." Then I, like Aeneas, our great ancestor, who did from the flames of Troy the old Anchises bear, so did I, the tired Caesar, and this man has now become a god, who I must bend my body low, if Caesar carelessly, but not on me. What does that mean? So what I'm saying is that if instead of this knowledge I've just shared with you, which I've kept for about 50 years, I had been taught about the gold processing, and I could recite it in the same way, would some of our people be unemployed? I could show somebody how to do it and be creating jobs. But with this, what I've told you, what job can I give somebody? And that was only 16th century English. And they even took us to 12th century English. A monk that was with us in that class, a manly man to bend an abbot able, full money a horse had in stable, and when that he rode, the men met his bridle here, gingling and whistling winds out the clear. The rule of St. Maur, St. Bennett, because it was old and some tail straight, so this monk Yaf not a pled hen that said that hunters but not holy men need that a monk that is cloisterless is likened to a fish that is waterless. What was that? But these were things taught here, University of Ghana. And we're cramming them in the library downstairs and reproducing them in exams and getting some good scores. And they said, go and become a professor and come and teach those things here. And I said, I beg you, I beg. If that's what you want to teach, it's not going to be productive. But the thing is still in my brain, I can't even get it out. And I would have liked the cocoa processing information to be there instead. But nobody taught me that. And I'm saying that there are many other subjects we all have learned, some of which were useful, but some of which may not have been that useful. And I'm hoping that the curriculum that we are now developing for our junior high schools and our senior high schools and all the way into our universities will become a lot more relevant content to the specific developmental needs of Ghana and Africa. And I want Vandals to be in the forefront and in the vanguard of that fight for relevance, academic relevance and academic content. Then, of course, there are many other challenges that we face as a people in terms of the integrity factor, the accountability factor. What is happening with Galamsey, for example? What is happening with the leakages of revenue in our national system? Even in the oil and gas sector, those who are close to it will tell you we don't necessarily know as a people, as a country, how much oil and gas is actually produced, and the experts I've spoken with have told me that it's not really well known. The measurement tools are not there. And so there are leakages in all those areas, and it's affecting our capacity as a nation to harness our total quantum of resources and revenues for our own benefit, to improve the educational sector, improve infrastructure, improve the healthcare sector. How is the Vandal going to use his knowledge, his leadership skills, his defiance, his bravery and his courage, his insistence on truth to champion this agenda? And I believe that is the charge that we have as an Old Vandals Association and as Vandals, current students in Vandal City. Above all, as you may know, if you divided the world's history into three main ages of human history, you'll have an agricultural age, which is what happened since Adam and Eve all the way to about 200 years ago. Then you have an industrial age. Africa and Ghana in particular lost out almost entirely in the agricultural age, because as I just said, we don't even have control over processing our raw materials, our foods. We did very little in the industrial age either, because until now we, as I said, you don't even invent anything, you don't manufacture anything. We tried to do a little bit of that in the Nkrumah era with Akasanoma TV and radio and refrigerators and all of that, but the state-owned ownership and management of enterprises didn't work out well. And so we lost all that technological drive, that industrialization drive that we had embarked on. We are now literally starting from scratch. Just one sugar factory in more than 40 years being established recently. We've lost most of our textile industries. The other industries that have taken place, of course, and a lot of services that have also come on board beyond simply manufacturing. But as we move forward and we take note of these three stages of human history, the agricultural age, the industrial age, and now in the last 20, 25 years, we're in the knowledge age. And this is a knowledge institution, University of Ghana, Commonwealth Hall. We are in a knowledge environment. But the difference in the kind of knowledge that we are talking about now is knowledge that is based on information and communication technologies. So if you refer to me as a former chief executive of the Commonwealth Telecom Organization, or even as a minister of communication or chairman of the National Communication Authority, I'm on the board of a number of telecom companies, what I see in that new dispensation, where there are now terabytes of broadband, submarine cables, satellites, that is bringing potential knowledge to Africa and among Africans, is how we, especially the current generation, can, for the first time in human history, take advantage of this impressive new technology. Because for the first time since Adam and Eve, a 16-year-old boy or girl can have as much knowledge, not wisdom, but knowledge, as his or her 60-year-old father or mother, by just tapping onto your mobile phones, accessing World Wide Web, various internet sites, etc. So now the knowledge is at our fingertips. Whatever we're not taught before, in theory, we can now find it. How are we going to harness this new technology and this new opportunity that has made the Facebooks and the Zuckerbergs and the Bill Gates and Alibabas all very wealthy? But not just purely from the commercial point of view, but from the knowledge aggregation point of view. And I make bold to say here in Commonwealth that in the years to come, nations and societies are not going to be judged just merely by per capita income or by gross domestic product, but indeed by gross domestic knowledge. The nations that have knowledge, that know how to produce the knowledge, know how to package it, know how to store it, know how to share it, know how to retrieve it, and distill it and analyze it, are the nations that will move fastest. And that knowledge, of course, then can translate into a whole lot of things, whether it is inventions or products and services. So small countries like the Taiwans or the Singapores are not depending on gold and cocoa and natural resources. Mauritius is not depending on the things we just talked about oil and gas. They're depending on getting the knowledge and moving it faster than the next guy. So it's a speed about how to use knowledge and use it fast. And I'm saying that this generation, your generation, you are using social media better than our generation. Some of them don't even know how to use computers. But how do we use our social media? How do we use our ICTs in a knowledge-sharing way, or just for chit-chatting and gossiping and pornography and, sharing photos of our weddings and our funerals, when we could be sharing the kind of knowledge I've just told you about, canning it? Would that knowledge be more useful than the latest pornographic video that you found? If you were to share it and poor farmers could see it on a projection on their walls in Adidome or in Winchi, where some of our distinguished people come from. Lots of tomatoes grow there, and some of it gets rotten, unfortunately. There's even a tomato factory there, and in Tichiman. So we have the opportunity to use the knowledge that we have access to, either in a very, very productive manner or not. In fact, in Kenya, when a donor institution once donated community ICT centers, and they came back to do an audit to see how the centers were working. These were some Nordic country donor institutions. They came to one village and they found a lot of old men lined up, to use the ICT center. And they wanted, this is very unusual. Why should about 75 or 80 old men all be standing in line just to use an ICT center? There were about 7 people there. They went inside and went and looked, and they realized that they have managed to get onto a nudity and pornographic site. And it was like cine. Everybody had to come and see it. So it is not merely having an ICT or community center. That means that you are encouraging development, or that people are really using the knowledge that they are getting for the desired national purposes. So as I conclude my address, let me say that the Old Vanguard Association, in my judgment, have a high responsibility to help in the mentorship of the next generation of Vandals. All of us here, we shouldn't come here only once in a while when there's a celebration, when there's an anniversary. But if some of you believe that the knowledge that our friends from the legal community have acquired, those who are in the banking community, those who are in oil and gas and energy, those who are in dentistry and pharmacy and so forth, that knowledge that they've acquired after leaving here, that by sharing some of that knowledge with you periodically, it will prepare you better for the world of work. Then one of the organizations that can assist in doing so, maybe in partnership with the Old Vandals Association, is the Africa Business Center for Developing Education, which has a mandate to offer mentorship programs, internship programs. Now, internships, for example, are becoming one of the most suitable ways of getting early employment. After your national service, you find that you would wish to stay in the same place if it's a so-called good organization. But they don't want you to stay there. They want you to leave. So another batch of national service people will come. What do you do next? You're at home. You don't know how to write a CV. You don't know how to write a cover letter. The grammar is all over the place. You need mentorship. You need people who have a little bit of time. Many of us now are 60. We have a little bit more time. We are semi-retired, or we've been retired by other political parties, in some cases. Premature retirement. So we can use our time productively by going back to our secondary schools and sharing with the next generation of students what they can expect in the real world. Because you have very wonderful teachers teaching them mathematics, music, history, geography, French, or what have you. But most of those teachers in secondary schools, as good as they are, have never and will probably never work at Agricultural Development Bank, at State Insurance Corporation, at Nestle, Tallow, or at Barry Callebaut, GNPC. They're not likely to work there at any time in their careers. Some may, most will not. So what are they teaching our students, our children, your younger brothers and sisters? They're just teaching them raw subjects without the experience that comes with having worked in those places. Then we have another batch of millions of the world of the professions and the academic institutions where people are teaching you certain raw subjects, but not all of them have the worldly experience that comes with it. Because at the end of the day, you want to get into the real world and get a job quickly and get promoted fast and get a good income. But if the knowledge that is outside is not coming to the classroom, then there's a disparity. How do we bridge it? Many of us at my age, a certain percentage of our classmates are already resting peacefully in a number of cemeteries. And they've taken all the knowledge with them. They couldn't leave any of the knowledge behind, unless, of course, they wrote some books or left over some videos. But by and large, we are losing a lot of institutional memory. And we want them to download that knowledge to all of us, especially the younger generation, before they move on. And I, again, call on the OVA to consider any reasonable ways to enter into those kinds of partnerships. So let me conclude by thanking the organizers again for giving me this chance to come and share these reflections on vandalism with you about the context of Ghana, the history of our country, of this hall, of vandalism and its practices, its values and its ethos, to identify some of the challenges we face as a people, and to recognize that vandals, by virtue of the values and the ethos that we have, the leadership, natural leadership that we develop here, the organizational skills we develop here, our sense of unity and brotherhood, the courage and bravery that we exhibit, the sense of freedom that may sometimes extend into some profanity as we enjoy ourselves, and with the guidance of Adabakus, that this institution, this Vandal city, this Vandal spirit can make a difference in our country, Ghana, can get us to unite our continent, Africa, and can raise the African continent to become the shining star that our founding fathers like Kwame Nkrumah and so many of our founding presidents had in mind. Thank you very much.